just briefly touch on the whole thing so you have some context here, because that's what actually matters, right? You know, I love Gabor Mate and what he's bringing through lately. Really powerful stuff. But he says, you know, what is a measure of a society? He feels like there should be two main things. Is what degree does it actually meet human needs? Like our actual needs. Our current societies are about making money. Like they're not even trying to meet human needs, right? And the second one is how well does it promote healthy human development? That's a thing. It's like so obvious. Like, isn't the point for us to like develop in healthy, mature, trauma-free ways, right? Our society's not even considering that. So very basic stuff to say, like, let's realign what the purpose is of these projects and these organizations to meet our needs and actually promote the healthy development of ourselves and our families, because what else is the point? Hello, beautiful people. Today I want to talk about crowd pooling as a process to help resource and get all of our awesome new paradigm, world-changing, beautiful, regenerative, healing, incredible, gorgeous, lovely, all the adjectives of all these projects I keep seeing, how to get these projects off the ground. And into the ground, rather. Because before I get into exactly what it is, I want to speak very bluntly about the problem. And the problem is that a lot of projects think they need money in order to get started. So that the regular journey is, come up with a business plan and then go seek investors to get money in order to get the project going. And what I really want to share with the crowd pooling concept is that we don't need money for our projects to get off the ground. In fact, we don't need money for anything. What we need is what money can buy, the thing on the other side of money, right? And those things might actually already exist in our community and we're not recognizing them. So what you see over here on the left side are all the different forms of capital, where money is just one of those forms of capital. Because what you actually have here in the middle is Bindhorn Eco Village. It's a really popular eco village, and it's an example of what a project could be. Not every project is an eco village. You can have an eco village, you can have a little micro garden, permaculture food forest in the city, you can have a co-housing development that's co-owned by the people. I mean, whatever project you want to do that's regenerative and healing the world and helping humans meet needs, which is really what all of this is really about. Each project is designed around helping humans meet needs, right? And that's what an eco-village is really designed around. It's, families coming together to say, what type of life do we want for our families? How do we want to live together? How do we want to meet our needs? So that's really what we would say a project is, what we're trying to crowd pool for. And to take a step back for a moment, what this slide is part of is a much larger episode that this is, halfway through it almost, that's talking about projects and walking through the process of like, what are our needs? How might we design a project that's designed for meeting our needs? So this is once we get to the point of understanding what our project is and what we're trying to accomplish and all of that stuff, where we're actually trying to raise the resources we need in order to get that project off the ground. And a lot of groups, and why I'm making this movie and this segment early, is a lot of groups are already there. A lot of groups have spent years, trying to figure out exactly what they want, where the land is, like what it looks like, and they've kind of put the whole vision together already. And then they're in this process of just waiting for money in order to get started. Okay, so that's where crowd pooling would step in. So, again, I kind of want to, speak to this. What is all of this about? Infinite games. So these are games that they're not intended to end. The game is, how do we best meet our needs and thrive together on this planet with all the rest of life? Or, whatever the purpose of your particular game is. And we do that by co-creating our commons. So whether that commons is a village or a project or an organization or a family or whatever your commons is, whatever you're creating together as a community, is what you're raising funds to launch and get started. Okay, so here's an example community who thought they needed to raise $990,000 in order to get their project off the ground. So what we have here in the first column is the financial capital. So this would be a crowdfunding that they just ran. The typical model where you say, hey, we got an idea, give us money. So let's pretend this community did that. They said, hey, we needed 990, we need money. And then their whole community showed up and they only got $550K. So bummer, they would have failed if they were just doing a crowdfunding campaign, right? And what what you might see here is this is all the different types of money too, right? Money isn't just nation state currencies anymore. Money is all the different cryptocurrencies and all the different forms of money that are starting to exist nowadays too, right? So you can raise different forms of financial capital with a crowd pulling process as well. Okay, so let's keep going. The next thing they did then is they said, okay, community, this is our big vision. We need 10 hectares of land. We need all of this stuff and blah, blah, blah. They mentioned all the things their community needed. And then their community showed up and said, hey, we have that stuff. Someone's like, hey, I have 10 hectares of land, and there's actually a whole bunch of fruiting trees, and there's a river and an expansive seed bank that comes with it too. And it's like, oh, awesome. Well, yeah, you can take that as a contribution. So now, instead of raising 990, because they thought they needed to buy the land, now they only need 690, right? Because someone in their community had the land. Then you can keep going. And they thought they needed to raise a whole bunch of money for buying equipment. They thought they needed to buy tractors and shovels and building equipment and all this stuff to get the project off the ground, right? So they factored that into their crowdfunding. But their community already has that stuff. Especially in rich countries today, there's so much stuff already. We don't need to make any more stuff. There's so much stuff that's already made, already out there. We don't need to buy anything new anymore. Like, come on. So many storage units just full of stuff. So we can, pool those things together. So the community showed up and said, hey, we have this stuff. Oh, cool. So you need 100K, even less, right? Then you can set up what's called a material library. Again, we have so much stuff, like at least in developed countries, those that really need to transition to regenerative civilizations. So I'm not talking to the impoverished people of the world here, of course. We could start pooling that stuff together. So instead of every family having a hammer because they need a hammer and having etc., all of these tools we hardly use, but we want to have access to, we can pool them together in a library, right? So one community library for all of these tools, and then we could sell the rest. We don't need 50 hammers as a community. Let's keep the 5 best ones and sell the other 45, and we can use that to raise additional funds for our projects, right? So setting up a community library is a big part of it. Pool all your resources that you need as a community, sell the excess that you have and the abundance that you have, and you can raise more money if you need more money that way, right? So what you see here is this new capital committed bar, right? Which we'll have right here. There's 2 different forms of capital that can be committed. One, the obvious forms that I just went over, like you can contribute land and physical items and stuff like that, right? But then you can also contribute time in the future. So what you have here is you had a permaculturist in your community. You thought you needed to raise money in order to hire someone to go and plant all those food forests. So you have, factored that into the money you're raising. But actually someone in your community wanted to do that and is willing to do that for you, right? So great, now you got that permaculturist on board. The same thing with the natural builder you thought you needed, to help build the community space. You actually already had one of those in your community. They're the ones that came with all the building equipment because they were already a builder. That's what they did in their current and past life, right? So this is, again, all the other forms of capital we can unlock in our communities that want to be part of these projects we're setting up, right? So now what you saw here is they started off thinking they needed to raise 990. They only raised the 555, so they thought they didn't make it. But as he went through the rest of the crowdfunding process, he found out that actually we had all of the capital we actually needed. In fact, we raised more money than we needed, right? And then what's the end result? What you see over here on the far right then, and my screen's cutting off a couple of them, so I didn't know how to fix that. And I'm not going to do the editing to remove it, so bear with me and just watch the longer episode if you want to see a better edited version of all of this. But anyway, the last column is showing how much each member contributed individually, right? And it all equals out to 150K. Because that was the goal of this particular community, is they said, we want everyone to be the same. We don't want anyone to feel like they've contributed more than others. We want everyone to feel like they're all equals in this community. Some people like family A that paid all their money up front, they might have that capital on hand and they can just pay in cash. Other people like family J, they don't have any of that capital up front. They might give their time, and they can contribute other forms of capital and earn their share over time. But right now, this community set a plan that over a not very long period of time, everyone has a plan to become equal. Even the person that had to contribute more, because their land was already worth more and they couldn't subdivide it, so they contributed 300K. So now there's a buyback plan. So other members and families that want to join and they want to contribute capital, cash, they can buy back some of their tokens. So they can contribute their 150K, right? So that was the plan for this community, and other groups might follow a similar process where we're looking at a more expansive view of what are all the forms of capital we actually need, what does our community have, and how do we equitably recognize all of those different types of contributions. Everything from, the professional yoga instruction for the community, a naturopath to heal members of the community, horticulturist, and this person's an apprentice, right? You can have all the different roles your community really needs to thrive, which includes every human and every person who's part of our communities, right? All right. And then we're not going to get into this one too long. The longer episode series, if you're interested, we'll dive into this idea of a microeconomy and how we can set up these minimum viable economic systems so that communities can come together, start meeting all of our needs in unique ways and thrive. But that's a much bigger, thing to touch on, and we'll do that another time. I'll just show you a few other things. So let me make that a little bit bigger like that. So what you see here on the left is that bigger episode series. So it really starts off on what are our needs. I'll just briefly touch on the whole thing so you have some context here, because that's what actually matters, right? I love Gabor Mate and what he's bringing through lately. Really powerful stuff, but he says, what is a measure of a society? He feels like there should be two main things: is what degree does it actually meet human needs, like our actual needs. Our current societies are about making money, like they're not even trying to meet human needs, right? And the second one is how well does it promote healthy human development? That's a thing, it's like so obvious, like isn't the point for us to develop in healthy, mature, trauma-free ways, right? Our society is not even considering that. So very basic stuff to say, let's realign what the purpose is of these projects and these organizations to meet our needs and actually promote the healthy development of ourselves and our families, because what else is the point? So you actually label those needs, and you can, put them out here. Love is a need, stability, diversity, play, honesty, all these things are needs, right? Let's talk about them as needs like they are. Blah, blah, blah. So that's what this will get into, and then go through each thing, like housing, that's a need. How are we going to go about meeting the need? So that's really what setting up a project is about, is what is the new type of economy that we're going to design? Is it going to be monopoly-based, capitals? Is it free markets, roles, which is a different type of economic system we'll touch on in here? Is it a sovereign-based economy? We'll get into all of this stuff. But that's the base understanding, is before we launch a project, what is the project? We're trying to meet our needs. Maybe we're trying to meet our needs in a unique way. How are we meeting our needs, etc. Which brings us to the last point. So this is what we call a minimum viable game. Because that's essentially what we're doing, isn't it? It's just like any game we play. We show up, we're going to sit down and play Monopoly. We look at the thing, we're like, okay, I've never played this before. You open the box, you have this game guide, and you sit down with your friends and you're like, okay, how do we play this new game? That's essentially what each one of our projects need in order to get to the crowdfunding and crowd pooling phase. Is they need this game guide that lets their community know what is the game, what are they playing, what are they agreeing to. So what are their patterns of co-creation? Like, how do we create together? How do we make decisions, and how, right? What is our legal structure, What are the initial membranes of our organization and roles? Like, these are things that we use to set up organizations that look like organisms. Like our body itself is an organism that organizes and does all this awesome stuff. And it has things like hearts and brains and these different organs. That's much like these new organizations we're creating, where they look like organisms like us, where each department looks more like an organ within that organism, right? So we can start mirroring our biology with how our bodies organize into humans and start designing our projects and our organizations to mirror that intelligence. I think we're going to have much healthier organizations. which is what all of this is about. And again, if this is all really foreign to you, just watch the episode series coming up. And then that's when you get to the crowd pooling structure itself. So after you know what your economy looks like and what you're trying to do, that's when you say, okay, we're raising all the resources we need to make it happen now. So that's when you get to this point. Other projects might feel they're already at this point. Fantastic. So now that you are, what does a DAO actually look like? There's lots of different DAOs. This is one of my favorite. It's one I'm a part of, so I'm super biased. You can use any DAO for this really, but this DAO was kind of designed for it. So let me walk you through what an example of that would be. So you have a project, you're raising all of these resources like you just talked about. You can come here, click on a new proposal within a DAO, click contributions, say, you know, I contributed land, you know, X hectares, blah, blah, blah. Say what it is, you could put in the documentation, which is maybe the title, and you can show the transfer to the legal entity showing you contributed land, right? And what's really cool is all the documentation you put here is stored on this interplanetary file system, which means it's stored on decentralized servers and it's there forever. It's pretty awesome. Anyway, so this is the power. This is where you start issuing tokens for those contributions. I could come in and say the land is worth this much. And organizations can use a DAO to issue dollar-like equivalents. So if your project has a bunch of money and they're buying land from someone, you could also use this process, in which case they would defer 0% because you'd pay them a cash token that you're holding. But if you're doing the crowd pooling process and you're actually distributing another token that you're minting to recognize a contribution, then they would defer all of it, right? So you would defer 100%, and now you're issuing your organization's token, which in this case, the example I'm using is Hypha, but this is what your project would do. And then that would make their proposal. They'd say, I contributed land, I'm looking for 20 million tokens, and I could put that up to a staging proposal. So now I'll show you what that looks like. Let's leave without saving. So this proposal, for example, has been staging. They have a proposal, they're asking for some tokens, and they're looking for feedback. So that's the first step, is you're doing a crowd pooling and you say we're looking for land. People can make proposals to your community and say, yeah, I got land, and put their proposal up. And you can leave comments, be like, yeah, that's the land we're looking for, or maybe that's not the right land, or whatever. If you like it and the community's like, yep, we want to accept this contribution to our crowdfunding and our crowd pooling campaign, then they'd make an actual proposal like this person did. They contributed a bunch of time and they did a bunch of stuff. So now they're asking for tokens from this project, right? And they're saying this is, I've done it, blah, 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 see the attached documents for details, and people can then vote on it. And if both of these bars are passing, and you can design your governance however you want in your crowd pooling, which is a video for another time, but in short order, you can decide what does it mean to have a passing proposal or not. Does that mean everyone needs to show up and say yes? Does that mean 10% needs to say yes? Does that mean only 50% need to say yes? Like whatever it is that has to come here and approve something, you set those thresholds. So then your crowd pooling is this process of having your community pull together all the resources you need for a project to succeed, and then collectively deciding and governing what resources are going to be pooled together into the project in order to launch it. And then issuing tokens to for all those contributions. Now those tokens could be connected to a legal entity, and a lot of jurisdictions across the globe are setting this up right now or have already. It's pretty phenomenal. You can basically do it anywhere in the globe now, from Utah or Wyoming DAO LLCs to Mauritius is launching a DAO framework, and Liechtenstein, and all over the globe, right? Where basically what you're doing in that DAO that I just showed you is a legal entity. So instead of paying a bunch of lawyer fees and doing all of the complex paperwork, etc., in order to make this happen, which is really just completely prohibitive to most projects. They don't have that legal or time or capital expense ability to do all that complex legal design, right? So it has just been unattainable to really do what we're presenting here. So that you can actually have a proposal process like this that's issuing actual equity in a company, which then actually owns the land that the community and project is operating on, which solves another big problem with a lot of projects where, I've talked to too many where one person was technically the owner of the land, but in good faith, they had, offered to this community and project to do a bunch of things, but then there was some conflict, and, the landowner just took it all back and kicked everyone off or whatever. Like, it's way too common of a story. So this process has also helped to design, to safeguard those, so that when everyone's contributing all their different forms of capital, that's actual equity in this actual legal entity. So that if things do dissolve and have to shut down, everyone gets an equitable, compensation for their time, when the land is sold and everything else, right? So it's drastically reducing the chance of, well, maybe not the chance, this whole process is meant to drastically reduce the chance of failure, but this is designed to, better safeguard people and have more transparent and democratic systems that can actually be trusted, right? So that's really what the DAO technology and tool for this process was really designed for, was for recognizing all the different forms of capital that could come into a project, doing it in a transparent and trusted way, where you can have all the roles and earth and all the forms of capital contributed to a project, so you can start these things without having to wait for money's permission. Because as our globe goes into this global recession right now, where there's just less money to go around, less investors making deals, etc., it is now vital more than ever that we get out of our idea in our heads that in order to do the work that's necessary to heal ourselves and heal our earth right now, that we have to get permission for money first. I think we're going to be waiting a long time, as we've been waiting, right? So that's what this structure's for, is to think beyond that and think, how do we start coordinating right now to do the stuff that we know needs to happen for us to start thriving as families on this planet. And this is what's super alive for me, because I'm 1 year into my fatherhood journey right now and parenthood with my wife, and it is so alive for us that we need communities and projects like this all over the globe to raise these new humans in. And way too many projects just keep thinking that they need money, and they've been waiting for money for way too long. So let's get into crowd pooling, beyond crowdfunding, raise all our forms of capital, surprise ourselves when we raise more money than we think that we needed, as it keeps happening with so many projects that I keep hearing about. All right, beautiful humans, I'll leave this one at this. Stick around, I'll be doing more episodes with more shorts, and hopefully I'll be getting to doing the whole season and this whole episode series at some point when my son is giving me a little bit more time. All right, I love you all. You guys are fantastic, and until next time.